afternoon, everyone. As she indicated, my name is Greg Young. I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Innovation here for Sovereign Health. I've just been with Sovereign now about a month. Previously, I was Vice President of Operations and Clinical Services for another treatment center in Orange County. I'm a licensed marriage economic therapist, and I've been working in this field for approximately 13 years now. So, when they asked me to do a presentation in the first week of my employment here, I'm like, I've got a lot to do. I guess I can put something together. But you know what I did? I defaulted to the boundaries and counter-transference, right? Boundaries and counter-transference. I'm sure that we've been hearing about this ever since we started our grad school, or if you're in case management. You know, no matter what field you're going to school for, they're always talking about boundaries and counter-transference issues. And I feel that, you know, this is a staple in what we do. And I also feel that no matter how much we hear about it, we need to keep hearing about it, because we're seeing things that occur between client and therapists and the industry continuously. So I had a question. How many of you get the Therapist magazine?
What?
Therapist mag. You remember at camp when you would get this magazine? Can I see it right? Sorry. Okay. So let me ask you another question. When you get this magazine, when you first get it, do you automatically open it up and go right to the disciplinary actions first? Right? I do too. It's the last couple pages of the book, right? But it's the first thing I go to. And my guess is that everyone else that gets this magazine does the same thing. And in here, it's basically like a police blotter in the newspaper of all the therapists and psychologists and any of those holding a license or an intern, what they've done to either lose their license or are very close to losing their license. And a lot of these, with the exception of alcohol, because a lot of them get pulled over and get a DUI, a lot of these have to do with these issues, boundaries and counter-transference, right? We all work very hard to get our degrees. We all work very hard to be in a profession to help other people. And it takes very little time to ruin all that, not only for yourselves, but for the patients that we work with. So I'm wondering, what is it? What is it about working with patients that some therapists struggle with? There's several issues, but I found this quote. I really like this quote. And it kind of gave me a picture of maybe some of the reasons. And so the quote states, "The standard of care itself conspires against the genuine meeting of persons. This is the real sine qua non." Now, if you don't know what sine qua non is, I didn't either, so I had to Google it. And so what it means is indispensable and essential action on healing. It keeps the patient and professional separate, even when they do not wish to be. It makes authenticity feel like a bad and dangerous thing. So I don't know what you take from that. But what I take from that is, as human beings, when we feel empathy for someone, if we have our friends, our loved ones, we go to them and we try to help them in a very different way than we would need to help a client in treatment, right? In a client in treatment, with our loved ones, we're going to hug them, we're going to, self-disclose, we're going to do a lot of things differently than we would with our patients. And that's, I think, the human condition. The natural tendency is to do that. And so as professionals, we have to be very mindful to not do that. The days of Yalom, working with this female patient who was losing her hair, and he would hold her and stroke her hair to make her feel beautiful, those days are over, right? Those days are long gone. Well, they should be anyway. I'm sure it's still happening out there somewhere. But that's why we're having this training, so that doesn't happen, right? So, yeah. So there's different types of boundary violations. We have the physical violation. We have emotional boundaries. There's something called the power differential. I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's actually the unspoken power differential. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. Obviously, confidentiality and dual relationships. And the other thing about this, too, is I really like to make this interactive. So if you have any questions, just jump up, or you don't have to jump up, but you can just speak up. You can jump up if you want to. And if you have experiences or examples, you know, to help the group, I mean, I'm all for that. So, okay. And there's probably other boundaries. Can anybody think of any other topics other than the ones that I have here that would fall into boundary violation, including these main ones?
I have a question about dual relationships. So the rule is for 2 years you can't have a business relationship with a client. Ethically, I've heard, which I agree with, is during a lifetime you should never mingle that. So what's the reality between the two?
That's a good question. So it depends who you ask. So, you know, camped, it says 2 years. Amped says 5 years, right? So, you know, the dual relationship, and that's something else I'm going to expand on a little bit too, because, and I'll give away one of the questions. I have a question later on. Is are all dual relationships bad? And the answer is no. Because there are some things that are dual relationships that we wouldn't think of as dual relationships. So the key to maintaining healthy boundaries is to be mindful and aware of what we're actually doing. Because we're just, you know, we're human beings, we interact with, kind of like the quote that I had, we kind of interact with people just on a normal, natural level. But when we get into this profession, we have to really be mindful of everything that we're doing and how we're interacting with people that we work with. So, yeah, but we'll expand a little bit more on that. But that's a very good question. You know. Anyone else? Okay. So obviously, the number one no with your clients is do not have sex with your clients. You know, I mean, I was in my master's program, and my professor says, do not have sex with your clients. There are plenty other people out there to have sex with. Don't have sex with your clients. Okay, and I can't tell you how many times I was reading it today. There's another one here today. You know, inappropriate sexual relationship with their clients. This does. Not only will you lose your license. I mean, that's a given. That will happen. But the damage that what we're causing the client or the patient, or however you want to refer to them, it's tremendous. And as professionals, you know, we need to maintain that boundary. If not, you know, that's number one right there. Okay. Now, when you're going through, you know, the benefit is of being therapists and interns is we have the benefit of having supervision. Okay. So we get to go and we get to talk to our supervisors. Are we going to be sexually attracted to some of our clients? Absolutely. It's going to happen. You know, and a lot of times people feel guilty and they won't say anything about that. You know, there may be clients you're attracted to, or they're attracted to you, you're attracted to them just naturally. It happens. But how we manage that, how we deal with that, that's the level of professionalism that we need to maintain. And like I just said, you know, it's important to process and talk about that with your clinical supervisor, and not feel embarrassed about it, because you're a human being. We're all human beings. We all have a limbic system. We all have emotions. But the level of difference in professionalism is managing that. Okay. So the sexual boundary would be a huge one. Another physical boundary violation would be, you know, meeting a client in an inappropriate meeting place. So we have our offices. We talk with clients there. You know, I've heard of people meeting their clients at Starbucks. So, first of all, you can have a confidential session at Starbucks, right? So that kind of leads into another violation of confidentiality issues. All right. And then we have to be careful of that falling into what's called a slippery slope. You know, next thing you're doing, you're meeting them at Starbucks in the morning, and then all of a sudden, then you're having dinner, and then you're walking on the beach to get the nice, you know, calming, relaxing environment, and you know, and that slippery slope just keeps going, and you know, getting out of it can do a lot of damage. Here's another seating in session. I put this on here because when we're seating in session, I'm sitting. You want to try to sit like at an angle like this, you know, and we're gonna have this. I I am not going to go up and sit right down next to my client. I'm not going to do it, but if you were sitting here, I'm not going to come down, I'm like, hey. No, I'm not going to do that. Or you shouldn't do that anyway. But you'd be surprised at what some people do. Touching. So I just talked about how y'all had done that with some fun, with some interventions. And I'm sure we all have situations that we can relate to as I'm talking about this. I'll have one I'll share. Touching and hugging. So I was in a session one time, and I'm sitting, and the room was kind of small, and the chairs were kind of close. So we were sitting face to face, kind of, you should have it like at an angle. And so the session was over, and we both stood up, and she did this. Put her arms around and start hugging her. What do I do? I can't get away from me, right? Then that's going to create damage to her. She's going to feel rejected. She's going to feel attacked. And so some of these things we just have to. They're going to happen. It's how we respond and react to them that makes the difference. So I was actually an intern when that happened, and so I went. I don't know what to do. I'm like, here I am standing there like this. I'm like, okay, So I went and spoke with my supervisor and talked with her about that, and I did. I processed it with the client, in the form of immediacy, which is when we want to talk about the white elephant in the room when that comes out. So those are ways to handle these situations. Talking, again, just like the sitting, the talking, the distance. So, talking distance is a cultural thing. In the United States, in the Western culture, it's a matter of, we feel more comfortable talking with someone we really don't know at about an arm's length. But everybody has probably had the experience where you've got somebody that likes to talk and they're right in your face. They want to talk and you're like, and you back up a little bit, right? And they keep moving forward. And so the talking distance actually, the more you get to know someone, so the research has shown, the more you get to know someone, the more the distance that they appear to you, get close to you, the more comfortable you are with that. So you notice, so that's Western culture. Eastern culture, it's the closest is there. I mean, they're much more comfortable being close. But when we have clients, we don't want to be standing right in their face or having them standing in our face, just like that. I mean, there's that healthy boundary that we need to maintain. Because again, we have to be aware and mindful of the slippery slope. And we can get caught on that in so many different ways. And these are just some of the simple ones that we can get caught. The dual relationships. So I think we need to check this slide here. Okay, dual relationships. So what's a dual relationship?
Working and personal.
Working and personal. Anyone else?
Business. Working together than working as a therapist. It might be co-workers.
Right. Yep. So you have someone as a client, and then you go to work in another place, and there they are as a coworker. So dual relationships. Dual relationships can be anything from that to. Sorry.
Your mechanic.
Your mechanic. Exactly.
Live in a small town.
I was going to use dry cleaner as an example. Mechanic's a great example. Yeah. So is that a bad dual relationship? No. Right. A small town, exactly. The smaller the town, the more unavoidable it is. If it can be avoidable, then you do it. But if it's not, then you don't. Right. So that's what I was saying earlier, that they're not all bad, because most times we wouldn't think of that being a dual relationship, but it does. If I had take my car to the shop to get John the mechanic to fix it, but John's also my client. There's more going on there than just John being my mechanic, right?
Can I ask something before you jump to the next? The hugging one. So you're involved in 12-step recovery.
Excellent point.
And
They're huggers.
We're huggers.
Yeah.
And then you come to treatment and you see somebody that maybe you met 2 years ago at a meeting, I mean, you don't wanna embarrass the person, and there's comfort, I mean, if you've worked in treatment a long time, you know the ways to hug without hugging, if that makes any sense. That's not inappropriate, it is I mean, you tell me.
So, okay, so a lot of these are, you know, how do we answer, what do we do, right? And you're absolutely right. So AA is a hugging community. Everybody hugs. And so what I say, because I've been working in treatment for a while, and you know, there's a lot of people that are in recovery that work in recovery. And so when they're working, so we take guys to meetings, clients to meetings, and when I tell the clients, I'm like, okay, so there needs to be, again, a healthy boundary between your program and your work. Okay, so when you go to a meeting, if you're on the job and you're going to a meeting, you are not going to that meeting, right? You are going there to basically watch the clients that are going to that meeting. You don't share in that meeting, you don't participate in that meeting, so we have to take that and translate that at the workplace. So, you know, if we're in recovery and we see a client, and that's another really good example too, we see a client at our treatment center and we go to a meeting and there's a client, what do? Well, in Orange County there are tons of meetings. But you're like, no, wait, that's my favorite meeting. I want to go. So we have to think of the client before ourselves on that. Yes, sir.
What if you're the main speaker?
Thank you.
There's always a wrench to throw in everything.
Exactly.
Right. So this is not a black and white issue. There's going to be gray areas, and so what we have to do is, if it's unavoidable, if you're like a speaker meeting and you speak, but not a regular attendee.
Right.
Yeah. So you know that again. I don't see that as much of a boundary violation, but I'm not the judge and the jury and all that either. You know, we have to think about when working with our clients is how is my involvement or communication or interaction going to affect this person? It's the same thing with like self-disclosure when we're working with patients and clients. What is the motive? So I always ask myself that before I try to do anything, or I try to ask myself this. I'm getting ready to do something. What is my underlying motive for my action? Right? Yes, sir.
That's a rule of thumb. I've always felt that if one is a recovering alcoholic, when they're at a meeting, they're wearing that hat as Bill, the recovering alcoholic, not Bill, the therapist, right? And so therefore they should act accordingly, you know, as a member of AA as opposed to being a therapist, right? So I think, in my opinion, I think that kind of separates those boundaries, you know, it doesn't muddy the water.
Yeah, so you set a boundary while you're there. You know, if you're speaking at an event and then one of your clients comes up and wants to do therapy, you're like, you know, I'm not here as your therapist. I'm here as a mentor. So there are ways to manage.
I want to cloud that one a little bit different.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm not a therapist, I'm a case manager.
Okay.
So I walk up to the center every day, either that door or this door, and periodically have to walk through patients, and there always seems to be one that wants to hug.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know how to give a hug without giving a hug.
Okay.
So I don't in any way, shape, or form feel it's inappropriate, because it isn't like a heartfelt hug. It's, I'm not gonna embarrass, no, there's a difference. It's not, it's a hug that says, I'm not gonna embarrass you in front of everybody else standing there and saying, I don't hug. Yeah,
Yeah, so what does that do how does that affect all the other patients?
I don't know that it does,
Hey, well,
because
she's hugging
it's,
so-and-so, she's not hugging, you know, what is that, so we gotta, yeah, I mean, that's something you have to answer for yourself. I'm gonna go to the extreme and say, you know, we've gotta be mindful of what we're doing, because not only is that interaction affecting that person, we've gotta look at everybody else that's watching it as well. You know, oh, she likes that person more than me. I mean, you know, we're dealing with individuals who, you know, psychologically are not their biological age. You know, and there's triggers that can be, you know, set off with abandonment issues and mom issues and dad issues. I mean, all kinds of issues. So we have to be really mindful and aware of our surroundings and our actions. So that's a question that, you know, I would just invite you to be mindful of that when you do that. So.
I don't think.
Yes.
I'm really embarrassed to ask this question, but we have to. What happens when you're teaching a class and you open up the door and they all come and hug you, all of them, and going, I'm so glad you're teaching our class today, I'm so glad you're here, and you're like, okay, everybody take your seats. No, I'm asking, she just asked us, she goes, are you not allowed to do that? I'm like, he said just freeze. I'm like, just freeze. So, I mean this sincerely, please. I agree with what the case manager just said, because we do have a lot of people that come in and also thanked us for their treatment here. I mean that. They stop at our window and say, open up, we open the door, we're leaving today. Thank you for everything. I got this. Thank you so much. If it wasn't for you, I couldn't have done this. Thank you. And it feels good, but it's not one of those, it's just a thank you. I don't know. I feel a little confused on that because you embarrassed me. Thanks a lot.
Well, no, I mean, don't be embarrassed. See, that's a really great example
I don't
of
know what
something
you're
happening
saying.
and not wanting to go talk about it to be able to process what's happening, right?
She's curious. She's curious.
Yeah, no.
Therapist?
It's okay, it's okay.
So,
You're good.
like I said, there's no black and white answer on this stuff. The purpose of the training is to just bring this stuff and to be mindful of it.
Okay.
To be able to, when it is happening, you can think, is this what's my motive? Is it helpful to the client? Is it helpful, am I doing it for me? And we're going to talk a little bit about that because a lot of therapists and people do this stuff for them, which is not the right motive. So I'm sorry I'm not able to give you a direct black and white answer, but
Mindful.
Yes. So emotional. Abusing emotional boundary. We can, and again, you guys know this, right? It's all in the disciplinary actions here. We can exploit clients emotionally. They can foster dependence on us. People that are, exploit them financially. I've seen instances in here where therapists are harassing. I just saw it in here today. They're harassing their patients. Patient gave a therapist a bad review on Yelp, and she sent her a legal thing, and it said it takes two to tango, and I'll ruin your credibility, and you don't take it off Yelp. I mean, this stuff, folks, really happens. It's astounding to me how this happens. This is abuse. I mean, this is abuse, quite frankly, for the patients. And it can cause a lot of shame for the patient. They come to us because they're hurting, they're vulnerable. I mean, for someone to even come to see you is showing a tremendous amount of vulnerability, and to be able to ask for help are basically, to a complete stranger to come tell you all of their problems and what's going on with them. It takes a huge amount of courage and vulnerability, and we have to be very careful that we're not using it. It's again, it's just astounding to me how much that occurs in the therapeutic community today, and how much damage occurs.
Do you have any tips on if a patient feels exploited because they feel that we're keeping them here longer and not recommending discharge in order to utilize their insurance for financial gain? It's obviously not the case, but patients sometimes will feel that way. So is that an example of when a patient feels exploited, but it's indirect? It's not that we are exploiting them, but they feel that way. It's kind of a twist. And how do you suggest we do that?
Yeah, well, yeah, so, I don't know about sovereignty. I mean, I looked at some of the
It's universal, it's not sovereign. I want to really go on the record and say it's his patients in general don't want to be in treatment, and using this as an excuse.
Sure.
It happens in every treatment center, nothing to do with sovereign.
Yeah, so I would say whether it's here or whether it's another treatment center, I don't see patients in treatment really much longer than 90 days. Sometimes maybe a little longer than that. And there is a line where somebody I feel can be in treatment. There's a point where they need to be in treatment long enough to get the help that they need to ingrain the new behaviors and thought processes and to learn the tools to be able to work and be able to function in outside community. Okay, and then there's also a line where they're staying in treatment so long that now we've become the new parent and they've now brought their dependency on us, right? So where's that line? You know, again, no black and white answer, but you know, if you've got a patient, you know, and again, depending on the severity of their problems and their issues, you know, it's depending on how long they need to be in treatment. You know, and I don't want to get off too much on that's a whole other lecture training, but you know, there was a study put out about the 30, you know, how everybody does 30-day. You know, after 30 days you're healed. Well, nobody's going to be healed in 30 days, you know. And, you know, everybody's looking at the 90-day model of what can occur in 90 days and what we do in that 90 days. So, but you're right, you know, there's patients will come up with all kinds of different reasons why they should not stay in treatment.
Right.
And that's just one of them. And they're crafty. They're very crafty.
Yeah, I find that's a hard one, especially as a discharge planner. It's a hard one. It's one that so, you know, I'm also drug and alcohol counselor, so I take it to the if you're in recovery, most of them are, of course, I do motivational interviewing and self-reflection and, you know, a lot of different techniques there, but it takes time, and you know, eventually they usually come around and go, yeah, you're right, me personally, it's technique. So thank you so much for encouraging me to stay here, and I've learned so much more in these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so really quick, I'll do a brief intervention that I use with clients. They want to leave after 30 days, 2 weeks, 30 days, and so I say, okay, I get a whiteboard, I draw a line on it like this, and I say, okay, John, this is when you were born, and this line here is when you're going to die, right? So this is your lifeline, right here. You're 25 years old, okay, so you're right about here on the lifeline. So staying in treatment, so let's say you stay 90 days. Relative to where you are now, I want you to take this pencil. I want you to draw a line where 90 days would be from your current age right now. Where would that be on this whole line? You're 25. Where would 90 days be? And that line is going to be. It's probably going to be touching, right? So I say, okay. So I try to put things in perspective. Okay? So 90 days is relatively insignificant compared to the rest of the timeline, right? But what you do in this 90 days not only can extend this line, but can make that line a much more quality of life, right? So it helps them get a, you know, and it works really well because their level of functioning probably isn't that great, and it's a visual. So anything, I'm totally a believer in tangible intervention. They see it, you talk about it, you talk. They see it, and it's like, oh, you know, they can get their head around that. And so that's what I use a lot, and it works.
I've used that in a couple times because I run groups on the weekends, and then a number of times the male clients made the response of, oh, I can't give up 4, 8, or 12 Saturdays to be here. You know, my life is dependent on this. It's just 8 Saturdays out of my life.
Yeah.
And putting it in perspective of that, so I use that same exact.
Yeah, it works too. Yeah, it's a tremendous. It's very simple, and you know, keeping it simple is a tremendous intervention. So. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, power differential. Does anybody know the power differential? Put it here. So the power differential between staff and client that, if abused, could lead to significant distress for the client. So the power differential, I call it the unspoken power differential. So when I go to my doctor, you know, I'm a professional, I'm a therapist, but when I go see my doctor, there's a psychological power differential where now my doctor is a professional, right? It's like with our parents, when we're kids, I don't have to say, yeah, mom and dad, you are the boss of me, right? You just know. When we go to a professional for any other type of service, we automatically know, just unconsciously, that person has the knowledge and the expertise, and we're looking to them for help. So the same thing occurs with our patients. So we have to be careful, and even with support staff. Support staff work here. There's an unspoken power differential between the client, and that can be abused by the way that we talk to clients, by the way that we interact with them. If we're not healthy enough to manage our own counter-transference issues and boundaries, then this power differential can be abused because we can people can get on power trips and they can point and they can direct, and then the next goes back to the other issues where it exploits and shames and creates more damage than anything, right? So what do we do if we start falling into these traps? Again, be aware that there is a power differential. You know, when a client comes to see you, you know, they may be very nice, and you know, on the outside they look fine, and the communication is good, but they're still, you know, we're not like this. We're just not. I mean, as human beings we are, but as far as the differential between professional and the client, we're not. And it's important that we're not taking advantage of that. If we kind of find ourselves in that trap, you know, again, asking for help, you know, don't fall in a trap where I'm the professional, I've got it all together, I know everything. That gets us in a lot of trouble as well. You know, consult with supervisors, consult with peers. If there's a situation you're not sure about it, talk about it. You know, you'll do yourself and your clients a world of good to work to talk about this stuff. Okay, so other boundary violations, you know, is maintaining confidentiality. So we all know what informed consent, you know, talking, you know, before we started working with the client about, you know, hey, here's what's confidential, here's what's not confidential. You know, the integrity, maintaining integrity with the client. And I think somebody, maybe it was in a different meeting, talking about no matter what they say to us, no matter how they talk to us, how they treat us, again, we're the professional. I think what happens a lot of times is, again, we look at another human being and they look on the outside like they're fine. But we can't see visually on the inside. And we have to remind ourselves that, you know, they're here for a reason. They're in treatment for a reason, or they're coming to you for therapy. They're coming to therapy for a reason. Because they need help, and they're asking for help. Even though they may be mad and angry, and they're telling you they don't like you and they hate being here, you know, those are all defense mechanisms. And so having the professionalism and the wherewithal to understand that they're sick, to see through that, to see through those defense mechanisms, you know, we can alleviate a lot of our own anxiety of trying to get this patient or this client to work with us. So if we're feeling anxious and uptight and we need to work with this person, that's going to transcend right into the patient. It is. Whether you intend it or not, it's going to happen. Feeling pressure to get this client to do better, you got to get that off your shoulder. If that's on your shoulders, you got to get that off your shoulders, right? Because all of that is just going to create anxiety. The energy is going to transcend right into the client. The respect, the client, you know, trust and respect. We have to, again, this all is all tied together. We will earn trust through respect. Even if the client isn't, and I'm sure we all have situations where we work with clients and they treat us poorly, but we maintain our professionalism. And then later on down the road, they come up to you and they say, you know, I want to thank you for leaving me. You know, I know I may not have treated you well, and I know I yelled at you. But that, you know, like the saying is, if they knew better, they do better. It's what they know. It's the only thing they know how to do. And so earning that respect and having that trust, that's how you formulate that therapeutic relationship, healthy therapeutic relationship with the client. Because it's not you they're angry with, it's themselves. Confidentiality, you know, it can be broken through triangulation. You know, if we're talking with families, if I have a full consent to talk with a family member, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to tell the family member every single thing that's going on with that client. You know, I've got to balance that with the trust and the respect I have with the client. If it's something vital, you know, of course, they fall into different situations with adolescents. You know, I have different rules for them. But if it's something that is imperative that I feel that the family needs to be involved with, and maybe the family does need to be involved with it now, maybe the family needs to be involved with it later, I always try to work with the client to help engage them, to try to get them to work with their family and have them disclose. If it's life-threatening, obviously that's a whole different ballgame, right? But if we can get caught in this triangulation trap, really easy. Because if you will lose the trust and the respect of the client by going and calling the family and telling them everything, and he's like, what are you doing? So when I work with clients, I always talk to them, hey, look, this is happening, I think we should discuss this with your family. I never would tell the family anything that I didn't tell the client that I was going to tell them. And if the client, that gave me a great avenue to work with that patient, because they're like, no, okay, well, what's coming up for you, right? What's coming up for you when we talk about talking to the family? So it's a great avenue to tap into what's creating anxiety and tension in this client. So that, we have to be careful not to violate that boundary as well. Okay, so I think we've answered most of these already. What are dual relationships? Well, dual relationships are relationships we have with the client outside the therapeutic environment. Are they all bad? No, we've answered that question. But we've got to be mindful. If my child is on the same soccer team as my client's child, what do we do? So those are questions that, because it's a very small town and it's a very big town. What other avenue is it? There's different mechanics, there's different dry cleaners. So we've really got to look at all this and take this all into consideration when we're doing these things. So is this a boundary crossing? That's relative to a question to ask yourself when you're considering dual relationships. Is it a boundary crossing? Right? The slippery slope. I talked about the slippery slope. The slippery slope will sneak up on you faster than you can imagine if we're not careful to manage that. One little interaction with a client in a questionable environment, that's kind of how I think, people relapse, is they start, they relapse in their mind. They've got everything set up in their mind and planned out, and then all of a sudden their behaviors aren't changed. They go back to the same old behaviors without using, so the only thing left to go back to their old selves is just the using part. So it starts with a little, I'm going to drive this way to work, or I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to go see this person. So we have to be careful that we're not stepping, and I'm saying we want to use, I'm saying that we have to be mindful of our actions in small increments of what we're doing. And we all know the fundamental code of working with patients is to do no harm. That's why you see you see a lot of crazy things in the disciplinary actions, but the biggest one you see most of the time is therapists getting DUIs.
What's the most memorable one you've read? Kind of shocking.
It was a therapist who was using meth, who was stalking his patient, and breaking into her house.
Wow.
You don't need to watch TV for entertainment. You can read it. It's right there. I guess I would stop. If you want some great entertainment, just subscribe to this magazine, and you'll be amazed at what's in it. Really.
Can you bring it to work one day? So
I'm sorry?
oh no.
Oh.
I was saying I think I have all those magazines. I should bring them into work.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't think
It's,
Yeah, there you go. I got that one. Come on.
And it's one of the other things I do too is I like, do I know this person? This one I hear this month for somebody in San Clemente, so I don't,
Who is it?
I'm not gonna say, just increase sales. So actually, remember, camp magazine is free. Sharpie camp.
It's what?
Sharpie.
So again, do no harm. That's our moral code.
Also came right.
Just to do no harm. We have to be careful because we're dealing with people's psychological stability, and we have to be mindful of that. Okay, countertransference. So the definition of that can be considered in a broad sense any projections by the therapist or staff that distort the way they perceive and react to the client. So when we are working with clients, like I said before, we're human beings, we have a limbic system, we have our own past, we have our own issues that we've all gone through, and we can be sitting in a session with a client, and the client can trigger something in us, just like we can trigger something in them. So with the client, it's called transference. As the therapist, it's countertransference. And again, this is normal. So if you're feeling feelings with a client, don't feel ashamed of yourself, don't feel guilty, it's normal, all right? And the true professionals are the ones that go out and they work through it and process it. Because this can lead, not processing countertransference can lead into all the other issues we've discussed. So what it is like I just said, reactions that are intensified by the staff's own experience. So if I have a situation in my past, you know, and I've developed schemas to those past situations, those can be triggered by anyone, right? And clients aren't out of the loop on that. So how does countertransference affect the client? How can it affect the client? How can it affect the staff? So it can affect the client significantly, right? Because it's affecting us. And we're not able to be in our professional selves to be able to be objective with the client because our own stuff's getting our own way. Right. Now, there are situations where if we can't work through it, then what's the right thing to do? Refer, right? So we talk about it with our supervisors, we talk to peers. If we can't work through the issue, then we refer. Okay. So how can it affect the staff? How can it affect the therapist, countertransference? It keeps us from, like I just said already actually, it keeps us from being being provided the service that we need to provide. Yes?
So when situations like when we're in recovery, we work in recovery, and we have patients that leave and they overdose, and the news kind of spreads to wildfire without the treatment, and you have staff that was close to the client, to the patient, and then you have patients that knew the patient. It's kind of a very difficult situation where you have a lot of going on. What's kind of the best situation to how to deal with that? I mean, it kind of feels inhuman to walk away from it when they're, thinking, well, you're a professional, you don't feel anything for this person. I mean, that's kind of a difficult situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been in those situations. I mean, I'm sure several of us have been in those situations. And so, I mean, in the centers I worked with before when that happened, and it's important. We think about that we get the clients together, and we've got to get the clients and work as a group and process this as a group. But a lot of times we forget about the staff who's been working with that client. And so what we've done in the past is we've pulled the staff together and done a process group with the staff to work through those issues. Because again, we're human beings just like the clients. We're going to be affected by this. And that happened to me when I started as a therapist. My first 6 months, I was in two clients, and all of a sudden we start, look what I've done differently. If I just we start putting it on ourselves, and so that's why it's important to process all that information. Can countertransference be helpful in any way?
Yes. It can help us move forward and help us grow through past experiences. That's why going to therapy for ourselves is very important.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, that's a great answer. So we all see therapists out there. There's tons of therapists in like any profession, doctors, lawyers, mechanics. There's good ones and there's not so good ones. Right? Now, my personal feeling on this, and it may not, somebody may or may not disagree, but I'm going to tell you my personal feeling on this, is that the difference for me between a good therapist and a not so good therapist is a good therapist has actually gone and done therapy, right? Because again, we're all human beings, we all have a history, we all have issues that we've dealt with growing up, and if we're not working through those issues or worked on those issues, then all that's going to get done, all that's going to happen with that, if we don't process that and work through therapy and heal those issues, is we're abusing our clients, because that's going to come out and we're going to displace all that on our clients. And I see that happening a lot, unfortunately, in this industry. So some examples that we have to be mindful of. So if I haven't worked on some of my issues and I'm working with a client, am I being overprotective of a client not to trigger my own issues? Okay. Am I treating the client in a benign way? that may stem from staff who fear their anger. So, am I trying to keep them at bay? So I don't bring up their issues, because I know if I bring up their issues, they're really my issues. Rejecting a client may be based on staff perception the client is needy and independent. Won't let the client get close. So if I'm having issues with my own ability to connect, and I have my client in there, and I think that they're being needy and dependent. Now, some clients are needy and dependent. But I don't have the ability to have that healthy boundary to help process that without getting sucked in, because I don't want them to get too close to me. And here's a big one. Needing constant reinforcement and approval may be reflection of staff's needs for it. I use staff instead of therapists because this goes across all staff that work with patients and clients. So if I'm a therapist and I keep asking my client, how is therapy for you? Is it working for you? Are you doing good? Was that a good session?
Or night, great.
I mean, what am I doing? What am I doing? Right? I'm doing that for me. Because I need the constant reinforcement. Validation. Yeah. It's like, it makes the client uncomfortable, that's gotta be very uncomfortable. Yeah, you talk too much, the therapist does all the talking, right? There's clients sitting there listening. Okay, here's some of the other ones. So seeing yourself in clients may cause a loss of objectivity. Do you have more sympathy with some clients than other clients? So again, we have, I met clients where, I thought, talking to them, I'm like, wow, this wasn't my client, I could be friends with this person, right? I can relate so much by what's going on with them, that I see myself in a lot of what's happening. And then that's when we start talking, we start talking about ourselves more, and we start doing all the talking. So, and this kind of falls into the disclosure thing. So, disclosure is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the motive of how we're going to disclose. Some therapists, I'm not disclosing anything. Nothing. Some, I'm telling you everything. Right? Everything. And some, are kind of in the middle of the road. So we all have our own, first of all, I would not go to this side of the road. What I do is I personally use, am I going to disclose? I will disclose in a general way if I feel that it will be beneficial for the client's recovery. I personally think it gives something to the client too, because again, they're coming to you, complete stranger, and they're dumping everything that they have to you, and they don't know who you are. So again, it's each individual's own how they want to do that, but none at all, or based on if it would be helpful or not, but going to this end of the road where you're telling them every single thing, I don't think that, I think that really makes that distance between a therapeutic and client relationship much smaller and more of a friendship relationship. Also, developing sexual or romantic feelings can be exploitive. Okay, so I said earlier on, some people are just attracted to some people automatically. A lot of times we can't help how we feel, but we can help how we manage our feelings. Having romantic feelings for another person, or even with a client, we make feel guilty and everything. That probably will happen at some point in your career. That's okay. Acting on it is not okay. And that would be something you want to discuss with your clinical supervisor. Don't feel embarrassed, don't feel ashamed. It happens. This is how we react to it, right? Giving advice broadens the power differential and fosters dependence and initiates more self-disclosure. So, as therapists, I really try not to give advice, because that really, again, it fosters the dependence. What do I do? What do I do? And then if you start telling them what to do, yeah, your client you might have a long-term client, but that's not what we really look for. That's not the motive here, right? They're going to foster that dependence on you, and then the downside of this too, not only to foster dependence, if you give them advice and they go do what you suggested, and it didn't work out, then what? Right? You lost all credibility. And you've done damage to your client because I don't trust you anymore. Developing a social relationship may be a form of countertransference, especially during a therapeutic relationship. So we talked a lot about that today already. What kind of social relationship? You know, is it a mechanic, therapist? You know, is it something else where I'm always seeing this person almost every day or every other day outside the therapeutic relationship? So, be very careful of those things. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Is that was the last slide?